Doamne, ce viață au pe unii. Mașină, casă, interior lux, din fericire. O frumusețe de băiat pe aici. Așa. Bucătărie cât casă. Asta cum se numește salonul sau cum se spune în limba română, așa. Și adevărul e că nu e bani în buzunar.
That's 24-year-old Mohammed El Aboud filming a TikTok video in what appears to be his home, a luxurious 4-bedroom freehold semi-detached house located in Barnet, North London. The property, with a current value of £1.3 million, is ranked as the 5th most expensive home within its postcode, and so it looked then as if Mohammed was living at large, attempting to make something of himself on social media. But if it's one thing, ladies and gentlemen, it's that what someone portrays on the internet isn't always the truth, and in Mohammed's case, it could be far from that. You see, although he showed his audience a vast amount of wealth, he was actually homeless and only arrived in the United Kingdom a few months prior to that TikTok being filmed. While in the UK, reporters say he had no rights to work, although he managed to secure himself some employment through Deliveroo and warehouse work at Disney in Coventry. So how does a quote homeless man located in Coventry, who wasn't actually supposed to be working and, to take a wild guess, had a few £100s to his name at best, end up living rent-free in a £1.3 million home across the other side of England? Well, if you thought this story was about to take a dark turn, then you would have hit the nail on the head. After arriving in the United Kingdom, as you're aware, Mohammed managed to find employment at the Disney factory in Coventry, and it was here he met aspiring model Maria Amarukai. The two got on like a house on fire. Why? The love of TikTok, of course. As you can see, they were featured on Mohammed's page. Now, before you start thinking that this was more than just a friendship, it wasn't. Well, from what we know of the case anyway. No, the two were just good friends. Maria actually had a boyfriend, well, kind of, Kasai Al-Jundi. However, it isn't clear how they met, reports don't say. According to Maria, she said that Kasai had become infatuated with her and wanted to marry her. She insisted they didn't become romantically involved, but text messages sent between the pair, including them calling each other baby, my king, my queen, may paint a different picture. He said he loved me and would like to get to know me. Yep, Kasai wasn't exactly telling the truth. He had in fact had 3 children and a wife. Maria wasn't aware of any of this. With Kasai over in London, the Harrow area to be more specific, and Maria in Coventry, he was able to lead a double life. He portrayed himself as a multimillionaire to people who didn't know him well enough to know the truth. But the reality was, he had been a chef earning clean money at the Yasmin Sham restaurant in Willesden. The clean money clearly wasn't enough though. Swindling his way through many relationships once sparked up at the restaurant, he managed to romantically involve himself with customers to defraud them out of large sums of money. Take Anna Reich for instance. The 60-year-old was keen when a young man approached her interested. After exchanging numbers, it was clear to see from her point of view that Kasai was genuinely interested. I love you, I want you. Anna, no one else is inside my heart. I love you because I want you. Yes, I need you every time I need you. Drawn in by the flattery and weeks on into the, quote, relationship, Anna agreed to hand over a Toyota RAV4 and Audi TT in exchange for £57,000. To no surprise, she would never receive the money. In hindsight, she had this to say: "He has been psychologically manipulating me all this time. My intention was to get the money for the cars and get out of that situation as quickly as possible. He never paid me a penny. No cash or transfer, nothing. He was creative in his schemes." That was just one story that has been confirmed by police. However, it's believed that Kasai had targeted more vulnerable women with his charming ways. And on one summer's day in 2021, his latest and last victim, Louise Cam, would be murdered in a plot to defraud her out of millions. Sadly, there's no backstory into the woman we know as Louise Cam, other than she was a Chinese divorcee with a property portfolio worth millions. She had owned various properties in London, including a business premises and a block of flats across the road from where Kasai worked. It isn't clear how Kasai and Louise came into contact with each other. All we do know is that a friend had introduced the two. To no surprise, Kasai got to work instantly in what would be his biggest attempt to defraud someone. After all, she didn't just just own the business premises and the flats. She owned a £1.3 million home in Barnet, North London, and lived at another property in Potter Bar, Hertfordshire. It's clear to see that Louise was well off, although cash-wise maybe that wasn't necessarily the case, because when Kasai proposed to buy the business premises, the block of flats, and the house in Barnet for £6 million over the asking price, she was ready to sell up in order to buy her two sons properties elsewhere in the UK. It's not clear what character Kasai portrayed, but he did explain that he was being backed by his multi-millionaire girlfriend that he called Anna. That's right, the lady who herself fell victim to his schemes was put forward as this so-called backer. Initially, she helped out in the plan, sending voice notes with the proposal, but when she was asked to meet Louise face-to-face, she backed out. Mohammed was in on the plan though. Thinking he was going to purchase the property in Barnet, Louise handed the keys over to Mohammed, and as you know, when the keys touched his paw, he quickly turned on the camera and showed his TikTok audience the property he had just acquired. During months of deception, Kasai once again worked his magic and attempted to get romantically involved with Louise in order for her to hand over her properties. For weeks, Kasai tried to get various lawyers involved with the deal, but many refused to act, or advised that Louise would need separate legal representation, as the proposed transaction carried a high-level risk for her. Louise had to fork out on the legal fees and handed over £23,000 to Kasai. So many payments were made during that time period that her bank had refused further payments due to suspected fraud. Louise had to get on the phone and lie to them so the payments could continue to flow. Unsurprisingly, not all of the money was spent on legal fees. On July 18th, 2021, and after months of persuasion, Kasai managed to get Louise to sign a power of attorney document and a TR1 form. In other words, Louise had signed legal documents that would see Kasai be allowed to make decisions for her or act on her behalf in regards to the properties, meaning he would be the owner of all the properties in question. Confident in his plan, on July 24th, 2021, Kasai purchased an expensive fireplace for the house in Barnet, and on the 25th, instructed his solicitor to prepare a document that would purport to prove that Louise had entered into a contract and had been paid. It was no secret that this had been ongoing though. Louise had spoken out about the deal with family and friends. They all advised her that something more sinister was taking place, but she was so focused on getting the deal done that she ignored all the warning signs. July 26th, 2021 was the day the deal was supposed to be finalized. In one last call to her partner, she stressed that she was concerned that the money she anticipated being transferred was not going to be released, but she would go to the meeting anyway as she was promised that a solicitor would be there to show that everything was legit. At around 2:27 PM on July 26th, Louise was captured on CCTV pulling up to the property in Barnet. That would be the last time she was seen alive. Once arriving in the property, Mohammed, Kasai and Maria were all present, but it should be noted that Maria was in another room. She didn't even know what was about to take place. We don't exactly know what happened in those moments when she first entered, but it's believed that soon after, either Mohammed or Kasai wielded a hairdryer and strangled Louise with its cord. A violent struggle broke out, but after 40 seconds of being strangled and receiving blunt force trauma to the head, she was dead, meaning Kasai, in Louise's absence, could sign the properties over to himself. The final part of the plan was about to begin. Kasai told his mother that Louise was dying of cancer and told Louise's family and friends she had jetted off to China for a while so no one would notice that anything had happened to her. In the meantime, the pair wrapped Louise's body up in plastic bags and a duvet before placing her into a wheelie bin and covering it with garden rubbish. After the murder, Louise Cam's car was removed from the driveway, parked around the corner, and was sold later on that same day for just over £1,000. Then, 2 days later, on the 28th of July 2021, CCTV would capture the moment unsuspected workmen would move the bin to Kasai's home in Harrow. Roughly 19 minutes after the murder, Kasai took Marie to buy her diamond earrings worth £580 from a jeweller on Willesden High Road in order to create an alibi for himself. She was then taken back to Coventry later on that same day by Mohammed, and the pair struck up a conversation during a meal in a chicken shop. I couldn't believe I killed that lady. Maria didn't give the response Mohammed expected. No, I'm just joking, it was a silly joke. Do you want me to kill you too? After dropping her home, he explained he would have to head back to London to help clean the house up. But by that point, his fate had already been sealed because of the confession. By July 29th, 2021, 3 days after the murder, Louisa's son Greg on a hunch contacted police to explain that he hadn't heard from his mother and that it was out of character for her. So the police went to her properties to investigate, and when they ended up at the house in Barnet, the CCTV evidence pointed to the fact that Louise had entered the property but never left. Upon searching the house, the hairdryer was found in the hedge and the bin with her body had been tracked. DNA belonging to both was quite literally everywhere. But if that wasn't enough to secure a charge, believe it or not, ladies and gentlemen, Kasai had actually used Louisa's phone to send those messages to tell people that she had gone to China from the restaurant where he worked. He wasn't so clever after all then. The pair were both charged with murder and denied the charges that were brought against them. In court, Kasai didn't give evidence, rather pointed the finger at Mohammed, saying he committed the crime. Mohammed, on the other hand, did give evidence. He stated that he was sleeping at the time of the murder and woke up to Louise's dead body while Kasai was at the jeweller's. A call was then made which police confirmed as true, but the contents are of course unknown. We can only take Mohammed's word for what was said. I contacted Kasai because I was shocked that a dead lady was in the home. He had told me not to worry, I didn't have nothing, no family, no house, and he would sort everything out. He said he never contacted the police because he was afraid of what would happen and didn't call for an ambulance because he panicked. But this TikTok video that's playing on your screen right now took place just after the murder. He looks in a great mood to me. Remember how Louisa's car had been sold for £1,000 not too long after she was murdered? Well, it was actually Mohammed that had sold the vehicle on Facebook. The money accumulated from the sale was spent on clothes that he was wearing in the TikTok video. In the end, the mountain of evidence, along with Maria telling police what Mohammed had confessed, sealed a murder conviction.
On Thursday, the 19th of January 2023, you were convicted by the jury of the murder of Louise Cam, and I must now sentence the two of you. From the time you were first put in touch with Louise Cam earlier in 2021, Al Jundi, you told her lie after lie. You claimed to be a person of means, with the backing of a multi-millionaire girlfriend, who was going to fund the acquisition of her properties at a level in excess of the market value, so that Louise could provide homes for her two sons, and you could take your share. In fact, you had no assets of your own and no rich girlfriend. You told lies to many others connected to Louise, and wheedled your way into acquiring possession of two cars from another person who you befriended and deceived, Anna Reich. Anna Reich described you as something of a Walter Mitty. Al Jundi, you sought to persuade Louise Cam to enter into an arrangement whereby the properties would be gifted to you, ostensibly as this would avoid paying stamp duty and other duties, but in fact because this would result in you having legal ownership of them without having to pay anything. Over the weeks that followed, Al Jundi, you instructed or sought to instruct a number of different solicitors. They either refused to act or advised that Louise Cam would need separate legal representation, as the proposed transaction clearly carried a high level of risk for her. Through your cynical deception, it was Louise Cam who ended up paying for those legal services through which you hoped to defraud her. Louise Cam's bank ultimately refused to make further transfers to you because they suspected fraud. Such was your dishonesty that you caused Louise Cam to lie to her bank and mortgage provider in order that you could further profit from her. By the middle of 2021, Al Jundi, you had secured a power of attorney document signed by Louise Cam and signed TR1 transfer forms for both properties. On the material presented at trial, I am satisfied that by the 26th of July, Al-Jundi, you had resolved to kill Louise Khan. Your plans had crystallised at least a few days before. On the 24th of July, you bought an expensive fireplace for 16 Gallants Farm Road, a clear indication that you were treating the property as your own. And on the following day, you instructed your solicitor to prepare a document which would purport to prove that Louise Cam had entered into a contract and had been paid. On that same day, you told your mother that Louise Cam was dying of cancer and that you were to be left her assets in her will. It may well be that your plan was to pretend, as you subsequently claimed, that Louise Cam had travelled to China. Armed with the power of attorney and transfer forms, you may well have considered that in her absence you would have or could easily secure legal ownership of her properties. You plainly told El Aboud you would make a significant amount of money from Louise Cam's death, and that a share of that money was to be El Aboud's reward for killing her. El Aboud, you also played a role in the fraudulent activity before the 26th of July. You moved into the house in Gallants Farm Road and treated it as your own. Within hours of killing Louise Cam, you sold her BMW car for cash and spent some of the proceeds on new clothes. In TikTok videos you posted, you mocked the wealth of Louise Cam and showed you were enjoying the trappings of what you and Al-Jundi had achieved by your deceit. On the day that Louise Cam was killed, she had driven to her house at 16 Gallants Farm Road, expecting to meet with a solicitor and the parties to the transfer of her properties. Although she had been advised and warned by her family and others not to trust you, or to engage in the process of dealing with her property in the way she appeared to be doing, it seems that she mistakenly believed, despite these warnings, that all was above board. She spoke to her close friend, Kami Rahani, at 3 that afternoon. 11 minutes later, at 3:13, Al-Jundi, you left Gallants Farm Road and went with a girlfriend, Maria Amikrai, to seek to set up an alibi for the time of Louise's killing. Maria is someone else you deceived. You expressed your love for her and yet told her nothing of your wife and 3 children. Louise Cam was killed at Gallants Farm Road. The cord of a hairdryer was used as a ligature to strangle her. As the post-mortem examination revealed, there would have been a violent struggle when she was attacked. Other injuries were noted to her body, and it is likely she would have been killed within some 30 to 40 seconds of the attack starting and the ligature used. Her dead body was then left at 16 Gallants Farm Road. Having killed Louise, El Aboud, you moved her car from the driveway, parked it on a side street out of view. As I've mentioned, Al-Jundi, you went about seeking to provide yourself with an alibi for the time of the murder, and El Aboud, you drove Maria back to her home in Coventry before returning to London. In the course of driving Maria to her home, El Aboud, you told her you had killed Louise Cam, that she did not take you seriously, but you said you had grabbed her from behind. The account you gave to Maria was consistent with the way that Louise was killed. You told Maria Al-Jundi had asked you to do it, as the woman owed him £2 million, and Al-Jundi had promised a share of that money to you. You claimed to be scared of Al-Jundi, as you were dependent upon him for a job and a place to live. Later that day and into the early hours of the next day, the 2 of you wrapped Louise's body in plastic bags and a duvet before putting the body into a wheelie bin at 16 Gallants Farm Road and covering it with garden rubbish. Later, on the 27th of July, the 2 of you orchestrated the move of that wheelie bin from 16 Gallants Farm Road to 16 Wood End Road in Harrow, where it was placed with other wheelie bins, also with the number 16 marked on them, and other rubbish, so as to seek to cover up what you had done, and in the hope, no doubt, that the contents of the wheelie bin would end up at a local authority rubbish site and the atrocity you had committed would not be traced back to you. After you had killed Louise, you took her mobile phone and bank cards. Messages were sent from her phone purporting to be from her to her family and to her close friends. In those messages, you sought to deceive those who loved and cared for Louise as to her true whereabouts and what it was that you had done to her. El Aboud, when you were arrested in connection with Louise's disappearance, you claimed to be helping the police, but yet you told them nothing of what had actually happened. Al-Jundi, you told more lies to a solicitor about Louise, again in an effort to give yourself a cover story. You claimed that Louise had stolen money from you. Al-Jundi, you did not give evidence in the trial. Your case was that in effect El Aboud was the killer. El Aboud, when you gave evidence in the trial, you sought to blame Al-Jundi. While giving evidence, you were shown to have lied comprehensively as to what you had done, what you knew, and what had actually taken place. The two of you have rightly been convicted on compelling evidence. In moving impact statements from Louise's son Gregory and from Cami Rahani, it is clear how much Louise was loved and admired by her family and her friends. A woman of 71 who loved and cared for her sons, Richard and Gregory, suffered brutal injuries at your hands, and then with complete disregard, you sought to dispose of her remains. Al-Jundi, you are 25. There are no previous convictions recorded against you. El Aboud, you are 28. There are only minor matters recorded against you, and I propose to ignore those for the purpose of sentence. In relation to murder, the only sentence that can be passed on you is one of life imprisonment, and that is the sentence I will pass. The issue for this court is the minimum term that you will each serve before you are first considered for release. When it comes to the minimum term that you will serve, I make it plain that I am not ordering that you are to be released at the end of it. That will be a matter for the parole board. Only when the minimum term has been served can the parole board decide whether it is safe to release you or not. If the board does release you, you will remain on licence and liable to recall for the rest of your lives. I'm grateful to all for the helpful sentencing notes that have been provided. Having considered the provisions of Schedule 21 of the Sentencing Act 2020, this case has an initial start point for the minimum term of 30 years, on the basis that this was a murder done for gain. As I have indicated, the two of you had sought to defraud Louise out of her house, flats and commercial property. Figures set out in texts and other messages speak of several millions of pounds. Having identified 30 years as the appropriate initial start point for the minimum term, there are several aggravating factors to be considered in this case. Firstly, this was an attack by you that was extensively planned and premeditated. There was a significant degree of planning over a lengthy period. The messages that were uncovered in the investigation show the way in which you took advantage of her. I also note that the attack takes place in the home of Louise and her vulnerability. There were extensive efforts after the killing to conceal her body. Not only did you engage in efforts to physically conceal her body and what you had done, you also sent many, many messages to her family and closest friends, purporting to be from Louise, giving the impression she was alive and well and had disappeared with money that was yours. I need to be careful to avoid any double counting, as the start point here is one of 30 years. However, the features I have identified together do lead to a significant uplift in the appropriate minimum term. In terms of mitigating features in this case, there are none. In my judgment, this is a case with a clear intention to kill, and the only matter to pay some regard to is age and the lack of any convictions, or having only minor convictions recorded against you, and in your case, Al-Jundi, the impact on your wife and the children she will be left to bring up. El Aboud, although it might be said that Al-Jundi played the lead role in the long-running defrauding of Louise, I draw no distinction on the sentences to be passed on the two of you. The evidence clearly shows what you did and did willingly, and that you, along with Al-Jundi, did what you did out of greed. In my judgment, and taking into account all the aggravating and mitigating factors I have identified, the appropriate minimum term here is one of 35 years. The days on remand between arrest and now, which I'm told number 549 days in each of your cases, will count towards that sentence, and so the minimum term will be one of 35 years, less the 549 days. As the statutory surcharge applies in this case, the appropriate order can be drawn up. You may go down. Before leaving this case, I should firstly pay tribute to those police officers involved in this thorough, detailed and highly efficient investigation. I appreciate this will have been very much a team effort, but I would wish to acknowledge in particular the work of DI Robert Dodds. He was the officer in the case and oversaw the investigation and identified lines of inquiry. DC Mulleri, who was responsible for the digital evidence, the analysis of the device downloads, the phone call and cell site data, and the production of the timeline document. DC Sophie Daglish, the CCTV officer, conducted and oversaw the trawl of relevant areas for cameras, seizing and viewing the footage, producing over 200 clips of relevant evidence, as well as overseeing the production of evidence of the event and scene graphics. DC Laura Guys, who dealt with the witness coordination, management of the multiple civilian witnesses required to attend this trial, alongside the longer-term management of those key witnesses. DC Isla Edwards, the disclosure officer, in the context of an investigation which gathered a very significant volume of background material, and also DC David Musselwhite, the family liaison officer and responsible for the management of a number of key witnesses. I thank each of them most sincerely. In this trial, each defendant had the services of an interpreter so that they could follow proceedings in their native language. I would wish to express particular thanks to Mr. Jonas. He has been in this courtroom for much of the last 4 months, covering not only this trial, but also the one that I presided over before it. That also was a murder trial, but involved the partial defence of manslaughter by reason of diminished responsibility. As with this trial, the defendant gave evidence over a number of days, and there was complex mental health evidence called. The role of a court interpreter is not just with language skills, but in many other ways too. And it has been particularly obvious to me that not only is Mr. Jonas a highly proficient linguist, he is someone who understands the process of a trial. I know that what is seen in court is just a part of the role of a court interpreter. From all that I have seen and from what I know from those responsible for representing Mohammed El Aboud, Mr. Jonas, you are someone with not just the ability to provide continuous contemporaneous translation, but someone who is equipped with the emotional intelligence and intellectual understanding to bring to your work. Counsel for the defendant have made clear to me that you are someone who is an excellent interpreter with a complete understanding of the role. My sincere thanks to you, and I will make sure that a copy of these remarks are provided for you. Mr. Glasgow, the final word of thanks I want to express really is to you and to all at the bar for the assistance I was provided with during this case. Thank you. The sentence remarks will be uploaded onto the system, and I'll provide them to my clerk as well.